lovely day.
So I got a dream that I'm gonna be at the top of the scene. On every screen, making my presence something to be seen, yeah. I'll make them all see that I could be anything I wanna be. If you got a dream, then you need persistence and lots of belief, yeah. Yo, don't take that negative energy, I replace that. I just wanna be me, I don't fake that. I just wanna be free, yeah, chase that. I got a new obsession, it's helping and teaching and giving everyone a lesson. It's living and winning and building something that's impressive. I don't wanna do the same thing, I wanna be progressive. So I'ma make a new me, a new beast, a true fiend. He's everything that he wants to be. Look in the mirror, what he wants to see is a dude looking back at me. I stay on track, yeah, track things. I'm setting goals, life hacking. I'm steady stacking. I see myself being happy. A better me with a strategy that I'm attacking.
Put to the test, and you know I'll ace that. Hit me in the face and I'm hitting right back. I enjoy the chase, so I'll stay on track. Yeah, I enjoy the race, so I'll make that bag. Got a lot of dreams that I'll make come true.
Hey guys, Jim here. Welcome back once again. Isn't this an incredibly cool looking knife? I mean, seriously, I have played with this thing relentlessly since it arrived in my mailbox just a couple of days ago. Now, this is not my knife. This is a pass-around knife. It was generously donated by Jan Blaurock, the owner of Blaurock Blades, in order to let a lot of different reviewers give feedback on this knife because it is a new model. And let's be honest, when you're talking about a full custom knife at custom knife prices, you want the knife to be as perfect as it can possibly be to satisfy the largest amount of people and get that interest. Now, in the packaging that you just saw me unzip, the zippered pouch, you're going to receive, obviously, the knife. You're going to get a couple of cool PVC patches. And this strange little guy right here, along with Jan's business card. See if I can get it to focus there. If you guys want to read that more clearly, you can pause it and read it. And then your certificate of authenticity. Let's see if I can get it to sit straight for a second. There we go. Well, that zoomed in way too much. Ah! Anyway, there you go. I'm actually really excited about this because I recently came across Jan's knives, and when I saw the images that he was posting on Instagram, I was like, wow, that's refreshingly different. Super cool. And at first, I didn't know if I was looking at a mid-tech, a production, or a custom. And it turns out these are all custom made by one man. His name is Jan Ole Blaurock. And I'm probably mispronouncing his middle and last name. I apologize. And this is a CNC machine custom. So it's not a handmade custom where everything is done by hand. He does have the skill to be both a CNC machinist as well as a knife maker. So he's able to lay all these parts out, cut them with a CNC. He's even grinding this particular one with a CNC, and then hand fitting all of the components, setting the lock by hand, setting the detent by hand, tuning the action by hand, and he does what I can only say is an amazing job on all of that. This little guy right here that I was briefly mentioning earlier is going to be your pivot adjustment tool. It's a very, very cool idea because he's got a completely custom made pivot. On one side, he has machined in his logo. On this side is where you can make the adjustments, but there isn't a Torx head adjustment on there. You have to use this little tool. And it's really cool that he includes that in the price because there are plenty of knives out there, both in the custom and production world, where you get proprietary hardware, but they don't give you the tool to make your adjustments. They will either sell these things for a ridiculous amount of money or just not make them available at all, where you have to send your knife into their customer service center to have any adjustments made, which I think is a crock of shit. But it's nice to know that he's thinking ahead and including these things. I want to make sure these get back into the pouch before I send it back. I don't want to lose those. Now, what's the whole idea behind this knife? Who is the maker? Where is he from? All of these important questions will be answered, but I want to get to two important sections of the video first. The first one is called the TLDW. Too long, didn't watch. That's where I will quickly breeze through the pros and the cons of this particular knife. Then we'll go to the specs. I'll give you all the measurements, the dimensions, the weight, all that kind of good stuff, and maybe even do a side-by-side comparison with a similar knife. And then after that, I'll get into the full review, my thoughts, the overview, the backstory on the knife, the maker, all that kind of good stuff. Just to make sure you have a well-rounded review and it's broken up into sections where it's easier to digest. Starting off here with the TLDW. Pros. The overall design of this knife, the gorgeous lines, every little thing that's been done in this design that makes it unique, I fell completely in love with. So much so that I'm really going to have a hard time putting this back into the pouch and shipping it back to Jan because I desperately want this knife for myself. It is that friggin' cool, man. It really, really is. And it's a refreshing change of pace. Everything about this design looks just a little bit different from every other knife that's out there, and it makes it wonderfully unique. The next pro, let's get you back into focus. The pocket clip. I love how the pocket clip sweeps with the design of the frame. The pocket clip was not an afterthought, and we have seen that countless times on countless knives where there's just a little pocket clip just kind of slapped onto a knife. It doesn't follow the flow and shape of the frame or the flow and shape of the blade, and it may not even be a finish that complements or contrasts any part of the knife. And this one is just perfect. It also works very well. That's another important key thing, that that it not only looks good, but it actually functions well, and this certainly does. Next item up on the pros is the amazing machining. Look at all of the milling that's been done to further accentuate the beauty lines of this knife. How clean everything is done. The chamfering is done perfectly, and then he's gone back over the chamfered areas and done the micro milling, which looks fan-friggin-tastic. I particularly love how this very large chamfer goes all the way across the accordion-style lock bar cutout. That's a risky thing to just go ahead and do because you could really screw this area up. And he's got the balls, and he did it, and it looks great. He's also machined lightning pockets into the frame on both sides, even the lock side, and it's done extraordinarily well. The custom shape of the D-shaped pivot, where it fits in perfectly into the same cutouts of the frame. The machining of his pivot is dead on perfect. It looks amazing. He thought everything out very, very thoroughly before the execution, and it shows very, very clearly. So yeah, I am impressed visually with the knife, 1000%. Fit and finish on this knife is fantastic. All of the materials mate up perfectly. It's like you don't have a little protrusion of the back spacer or of the frame around the back spacer. The clip is fitted perfectly. The blade is perfectly centered. The lockup is dead on perfect. Everything that was done on the knife making level of this knife is every bit as good as the machining level. And I got to tell you, for the price, I'm very, very, very impressed. Next up, the custom pivot and the pivot tool that also doubles as a lanyard bead. If you decided to throw a lanyard on here, that pivot tool that I showed you earlier doubles as a lanyard bead. So you could always have the tool with you without having it sit in your pocket. It could be on the end of your lanyard, and then you could make any adjustments if you wanted to make the tension on the blade a little bit tighter. Not on the blade, but on the bearings a little bit tighter or a little bit looser. Or if you had to field strip the knife and take it apart, well, you would still need a Torx because you have a body screw back here that holds the back spacer in. So yeah, you would still need a Torx with you. But still, it's a really cool, really novel idea. I don't believe, I can't recall seeing anybody doing that in the past. And another pro for me is going to be this very smooth, very snappy action. Fantastically done. The detent is just dead on perfect. The blade glides. I mean, absolutely glides. The action is just fantastic. And the detent is certainly strong enough to hold the blade in place when it's closed and to give you a nice snappy firing action when you flip it out. Another pro for me is going to be the blade window design and execution. Love it. I think it looks great. I love the shape of the window there, the overall shape, and the way that it's broken up with these two posts. Looks good, feels good on the fingers when you're doing a reverse flick, the whole works. Another thing that I like is he took the time to reduce the weight on this to make this a really pocket-friendly, everyday carry knife. This is going to be very close to the size of a Roosevelt, the Oz Company Roosevelt, and I'm thinking it's just a hair lighter as well. I'd have to go back and rewatch my Roosevelt video and look at the specs and see what I weighed the Roosevelt at. But this seems very, very close, maybe a touch heftier. All right, now the cons. Now, I don't want you to take these too terribly offensively because you got to remember these are individually made customs. And he's also going through a tweaking process where he's constantly evolving this model. So by the time you see this video, if you decide, hey, I love everything about this knife, I want to order one, there's a very good chance that something that I've picked apart on this in the con section may have been resolved by the time he goes to build your knife, or it's something that you could simply jot down when you're messaging him and go, hey, I was kind of concerned about this one little thing that Jim mentioned. Can we work on that for mine to avoid that issue? I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem. Now, the first thing for me is going to be the very slight tip protrusion. I'm going to give you a close-up. And you don't really even have to push in and really get the meat of your finger in there very far, and you can feel the tip. Now, this is a direct result of the geometry inside of the knife where the stop pin is located. I'm going to give you kind of a cutaway version image that Jan has on his Instagram to show you the internals of this knife. You'll see the lightning pockets that are machined in so well, but you'll see the placement of the stop pin. And if that was ever so slightly moved, then this blade could close and the tip could go just a little bit further in, and that issue would be completely resolved. And it's a very simple thing to change, and I think just by making that tiny adjustment, all of his knives going forward will probably have that issue corrected. And again, remember, this is a custom. This knife, this individual representation may be the only one that has that slight tip protrusion. His other ones may not have that whatsoever. Hey guys, sorry for the interruption, but I promise I will make this very, very brief. I want to thank those of you that have joined and become channel members. You are helping to support the channel and helping to continue the growth. And if you've been considering supporting the channel in any way, shape, or form, because I do not have channel sponsors, I don't shill anybody's products, I don't get paid for anything, I don't do affiliate links, so everything is completely self-funded. If you'd like to help out and watch the channel grow and get more great content coming your way, please do consider becoming a member. Now, the other thing for me that's a con would be the fact that while this is a wonderfully compact knife, and I've gotten to really enjoy some of these smaller compact knives, for my large hands, I wear a size large to extra large motorcycle glove, and it just feels a little bit too tiny for me. And that's because where this prominent finger choil is, it ends rather abruptly. This could be shortened a little bit, where there's a little bit more of a cutout, where my hand can move up a little bit more. And for me personally, I would really love to see a forward finger choil here that goes into where the sharpening choil is, so that you could actually choke up on the blade. This is a knife, due to its size, that I would really want to choke up on the blade to get that different handheld. And I'm going to give you a comparison here. I had brought this out to do a size comparison. This is the production EMP EDC Nimble, which if you follow my channel for any length of time, you know that this is one of my favorite inexpensive production knives, and it's a wonderful fidget toy. They're very similar in size. And yes, if I hold it all the way back here, it feels like it's going to come out of my hand because it's too tiny. But that forward finger choil right up there locks me in. And it gives me plenty of room, and I feel like I've got more control over this knife. And I truly, truly enjoy carrying the Nimbles. I have a couple of them, and I love them for that reason, because of the way they fit in my hand. And if you look at these side by side, you could see where the BRB4 could easily have the exact same configuration and work out very, very easily to fit a much larger hand. Now, if you've got smaller hands, small to medium-sized hands, that's probably not going to be an issue for you at all. If you already own a lot of knives in this size range, then you probably already hold your knife in a particular way that this is not going to be any sort of inconvenience for you. Another con for me is going to be the lanyard hole through the frame. I'm always going to be that guy that brings this up because I've been on both sides of this. There are some knives that I do want to use a lanyard on because maybe the frame is too slick or the pocket clip is too tight, and it helps me get the knife out of my pocket and help me feel like I've got a better grip on it. But those are very few and far between. So 95% of all the knives I've ever owned, I've never tied a lanyard onto them. And as such, I don't want to have an unsightly hole taking away from the overall aesthetics of the design. And I do know, I've listened to a lot of people make that same complaint and go, yeah, I would never buy that knife because there's a big slot or a big hole cut all the way through the frame and back spacer, and I don't like how it looks. I've never looked at that as a deal breaker personally, but I know for some people it can be. Another one is going to be operationally. The flipper tab really, really needs some work in a few different ways. Number one, you can see how it's shaped. This is not a push button flipper style. This is a light switch. You are flipping it. You are sliding your fingers across it. You cannot push button this. If you push straight down on the flipper tab, it doesn't do a thing. So that sharp corner right there with these sharp edges, not fun. Also, it's got a very sharp detent. So if you have a finger on this lock bar at all, I haven't looked in here to see the actual detent ball, but it feels, the way that it breaks, it almost feels like it could be a flat face detent like a David Mosier or a Pohan Lu. And I still can't quite see. Can we zoom in? Come on. Give me some focus. Come on. Yeah, I still can't quite see it in there. Regardless, it's a very sharp detent, which feels great. However, if your finger is applying any amount of pressure to that lock bar, you're never, ever, ever going to flip it. And that's where you really feel, you can see the indent on my finger there. That's where you really feel the corners and the harshness of the flipper tab. The other thing that I don't like is that when you break that detent with the flipper tab and you're following through, look where your finger goes. Now this is rounded off. It's softened a little bit. It's not, like a very, very sharp corner, but it is an irritation. When you simply notch your frame, that's where the finger is going to go once the blade starts to whip open. And that can be an irritation for a lot of people. For comparison, if you look at the EMP EDC Nimble, when you're following through there, this is just a notched frame as well. However, you see how they've made like a little ramp and everything is smoothed over. And you still get that same basic look. It's just this one's a little bit gentler on you. So that, for me, is kind of a huge deal. But that absolutely would not prevent me from wanting to own one of these. Now, I'm gonna step out of the TLDW here and get into the specs. And in the specs, I also want to discuss the price as well. I'm going to put the specs up on the screen right here. You can pause the video and read them on your own. Let's talk about the price. When I was first doing research on this, before I spoke, or before I communicated through messaging with Jan, I said, hey, I found a website that had one of these for sale. It's a secondary website, obviously, and they were selling it for $1,000. Are these really $1,000? And he's like, no. He goes, my selling price is $550, and I think there's a version that's $650 that he had told me about. So when you're looking at $550, I think you're right in the right price range, man. It's actually kind of a value. Again, speaking of the Roosevelt earlier, to buy a Roosevelt, you're starting around the $850 range, direct maker price, on a knife that could be considered to be somewhat similar to this. This is only $550. In a true full custom one-man shop, that is an exceptional value. It's an exceptional price. It would be on the high end if it were a production knife, but there are plenty of people that have spent, that have spent $550 on production knives that were not this nice, that I think this would be a nice, refreshing change of pace for them if they were to order one. So, yeah. I mean, price-wise, I think it's right exactly where it needs to be. And if you were to go with further embellishments, like getting into a Damascus blade or anything like that, you'll pay the extra for that. Now, keep in mind, you have 3 different types of blade grinds and finishes. One is the horizontal step milled CNC ground blade. Another one is a vertical milled CNC ground blade. And then he also does a hand ground blade, but he's not the one doing the hand grinding. That is done by Oliver Weber of OW Knives. And you could choose between the recurve or the trailing point version. Now this one is a straight edge. It is not the recurve. And then he has a trailing point version, which I'm sure I have inserted images of. This particular version has the RWL34 steel blade. Love RWL34. It is a fan-friggin-tastic steel. Great edge retention, great corrosion resistance. It's got a really good balance between toughness and hardness. It's not a mind-blowing degree on one or the other. It's just a fair balance between the two. Now, Jan is a sole knife maker in his shop in Germany. He began life as a CNC machinist. He's obviously a very prolific machinist. He's got a great degree of skill. And like a lot of modern knife makers, he's taken his machining knowledge and translated that into making knives based on his personal interest of loving knives. So now you've got somebody that's skilled in design, skilled in CAD, can write the program to have the CNC machine it. He's proficient enough with the CNC in order to make all of the individual components that he needs. And then he's hand fitting everything together as any knife maker would do with any other parts, no matter how they're made. And he's creating something that is visually striking, that is wonderfully sharp, has a fantastic action. Again, I'm very happy for that blade window so that I can do a reverse flick, because the flipper just doesn't work for me. It could be done, I just don't enjoy it. I really like the reverse flick on it. Overall, it's a really wonderful experience. Would I tell you to go out right now and send him a message and get one on order? Yes. I would add a couple of caveats to that. Making requests to make some very subtle changes that I've brought up here in the con section. And I think this would be one of the most talked about customs from a small maker that maybe a lot of people haven't heard of for the next year or two. I think this has the possibility of becoming one of the next it knives that everybody wants to get their hands on very, very easily. Just because I have a couple of little issues with it doesn't mean that you will. And it doesn't even mean that it would preclude me from ordering one. Like I said, I'm going to have a hard time pouching this back up and shipping it off, whether it's going to another reviewer or going back to Jan directly, just because I've really enjoyed my time with it. It is a lot of fun. It is so flickable. It is so smooth. And it feels so wonderfully unique, so different than everything else that I have in my collection, and quite a bit different from most every knife I've ever had a chance to review. So yeah, if given the opportunity and it's within your budget, I would say absolutely go for it. I want you to keep this in mind. While some people may look at any knife at $550 and go, oh, that's just too expensive, I couldn't spend that on a knife. Those of you that are watching my videos are generally doing so because you appreciate higher end knives, whether it be high end production or full customs or something in between. And keep in mind, for the price of some really amazing production knives like this Nimble, you're about $150 more than this to get a full custom. And maybe that means you're going to get into, now again, different price. Maybe it means you're going to want to get into a Damascus blade or a Damasteel blade or a variety of different finishes and textures and things like that. These are all things that are available to you because you're buying a custom. If you said, you know what, I really dig that BRB4, but I want a Damascus blade, I want a Damascus backspacer, and I want a zirconium pocket clip and zirconium pivot. These are things that you can dictate because it's a custom-made knife. You can't do that with the Nimble. You can buy from a lot of different options in the available variations that John has decided to offer and have produced. But you can't say, yeah, I want a Damascus blade and a Damascus backspacer and a zirconium pocket clip and pivot, because number one, this combination, if you wanted this particular knife, is not available that way. You'd have to buy additional hardware, and honestly, you would have to have somebody custom make a clip and backspacer for you. Actually, I'm sorry, he offers a Damascus backspacer as an additional option that you then install yourself after you receive the knife. But that's the difference between buying a production knife and buying a custom knife. Well worth it to get into a custom, always. As long as you don't mind making that monetary investment. And keep in mind, a really good quality custom knife rarely, if ever, goes down in value. Unless the maker has some sort of scandal that has popped up, or there has been some kind of very tragic, historical, problematic issue with the design, you're almost never going to lose money when you buy a custom. Production knives rarely hold their value and even more rarely appreciate in value. It's got to be something very special, very low production, unique in some way to that particular knife for it to appreciate in value. Customs, on the other hand, you're usually in pretty good shape. And I'm not a financial guru. I'm not giving you financial advice, investment advice, or anything like that. However, you're generally going to be better off in a custom knife than in a mid-tech or a production. And is this custom knife worth this kind of investment? Absolutely. I know plenty of knife makers that would make a knife similar to this and charge at least $200 to $300 more, easily. So to see this at this price, I'm actually pretty impressed. When I saw the initial listing, and I don't recall what website it was on, and I saw it for $1,000, I was like, oh man, I don't know. It's cool, but it's not $1,000 cool. This is cool, and it is absolutely $500 to $600 cool, definitely. So them's my thoughts. See if you guys agree or disagree. If anybody out there has one of these, please leave a comment down below and let people know your honest opinion on the knife. And if I was right or wrong on any particular one of my opinions, if you feel strongly in agreement or disagreement, I'd love to hear from you. I know there's not a lot of these out here, but I think over time we're going to see a big fan base pop up for Jan and his designs. I know he's releasing currently a new fixed blade model that's very similar to this. That would be a really cool matching set. And I'm excited to see what other models he has coming in the future that are different designs. There is an XL version of this that's going to be made available soon. I'm excited to see that one. I hope to get one of those in my hands to share with you as well, because I think that would be much more my size for my hand. And let's see what comes down the line in the future. Thank you for joining me as always, and I'll see you on the next video.